Hello everyone. Thank you for joining the 5 p.m. live discussion and interactive session on core engagement. I am going to be going through a basic introduction. I'm then going to be going over my top tips for core engagement and how to get a really strong core activation throughout your daily life. And then I'm also going to be advancing a couple of the exercises that we went over today. Thank you all for joining. It's good to see everyone coming through. If you have any questions throughout the session, please just bomb them through. I'll be taking those as they come out. And then yeah, guys, basically the start of it is the reason why we're going over this on today, Monday. I think it's where the real challenge for all of us starts. Last week it could have felt like a bit of a long weekend starting on a Thursday, Friday, but today it's sort of set in for a lot of us. We are on lockdown, and I hope that everyone had a good day 4 and a good Monday, and you've been able to keep to your routines, and some of you maybe got a bit of a workout from that core session that I sent out earlier last night. But yeah, guys, basically the core. Why is it so important? Why do we need to start off with it? I personally believe that it's the most important thing that any human being can get an understanding of when it comes to their body and their anatomy and how it functions. It's something that can save you a lot of ache and pain and irritation, and it's something that it's important for kids and the elderly. So it really is something that we should be trying to enforce upon people all around us, our friends, our family, even strangers. But in terms of why there's a little bit of a misunderstanding and a lot of people don't quite understand the reality behind the core, is that the core is quite a loose term. I mean, we understand the core, it's the center of something, it's where all your power comes from, fair enough, but we generally like to stay away from the term the core, simply because it is very loose. And I personally prefer lumbar-pelvic stability. Lumbar-pelvic meaning the interaction between your lumbar spine and your pelvis. That is a part of the core. But to just go over it very quickly, the core is any muscle that surrounds your spine. And essentially that spine, as we know, runs all the way from our neck all the way down to our buttocks. So to just think that if we have a nice six-pack, we have a strong core. I've had many patients come through thinking that they have a very strong core, and that's just not the case, guys. So that's possibly one of the reasons why we like to start off with it. And also for myself as a therapist, it is the be all and end all. I think most of the issues that people have throughout life come from a weak ability to activate their core, not necessarily weak muscles. It's also about that mind to body connection. And that's something that we're going to be chatting about quite briefly as well today. But just to go over the anatomy of the core, guys. So very briefly, I want you to imagine a Coke can, right? Before opening this Coke can, if you had to press it from any side, it would be quite robust. It wouldn't move anywhere. The reason being is that this Coke can has got a lot of intercompartmental pressure. Now that is the pressure within inside the Coke can that's pushing out into the walls and creating this tension, right? So now, if you take into account this intercompartmental pressure, our core is no different to that in our body. Our spine is the Coke can. The muscles surrounding the spine are the pressure, and they create the pressure surrounding our core in order to, surrounding our spine, in order to safeguard our spine through many difficult and challenging movements throughout our daily life. Now, in terms of where to begin, if we think of this Coke can, it's got a front side, it's got sides, it's got a back side, it's got an underside, and it's got a top side. And just like the Coke can, our core and our spine has got those exact same sides. So just looking at the anatomy of what's in the front, yes, we have our abs, nice six-pack if you're lucky, but realistically, guys, the deep muscles are the ones that create the tension on our spine, and those are the muscles that many of us don't even know exist. The most important muscle in the front, I like to think, is the transverse abdominis. This muscle, we call it the TA. It basically runs all the way from your spine on one side wraps around your body all the way to the other side. Now when this muscle contracts, it basically creates a corset type action onto your spine, and that's that drawing in maneuver that we all often are told when engaging the core, and that is why we do that maneuver. Now if we look at the sides, there's also our obliques, which are muscles that run directly on the side. If we look at our back, we got our lumbar multifidi, which are small muscles which run in between our vertebrae essentially. And if we look at the bottom end, we have the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is often quite a difficult one to think about engaging, simply because it's something that we're often not attached to. The other most important part is breathing. And in terms with that, we need our diaphragm to work. So in terms of how to get all of those things to function correctly, there's a very basic 6-step method that I like to teach my patients. Now the reason why I go over a 6-step method instead of just a bracing maneuver, often if someone just braces, they're engaging the wrong muscles. So I want you guys to focus on engaging the right muscles. So wherever you are right now, you can practice this 6-step movement, guys. It doesn't have to be in a specific position. The positions is something that I'm going to be talking about as well. I mean, you have 4 essential positions of daily life. We have standing, seated, lying, and quadruped, all fours position. And you need to be able to engage your muscles throughout those 4 positions in order to replicate that engagement into your daily life and be able to support your back throughout your life. But if we just go over the basics, essentially the first movement is a pelvic tilt. Now a lot of you have no idea what a pelvic tilt is, but basically an easy way to explain it is if I get sideways onto the camera, the ability to rotate my pelvis and create the lumbar lordosis, or rotate my pelvis upwards to create a flattening on my back. That is what I mean by the pelvic tilt. And that's a basic control that most of us actually lack. I want you guys to try it out. If you are unable to do it, just pop a message on here just so I know, and I can maybe talk you a little bit further through it. But if you have that basic engagement, that is the first point of the 6-point sequentium of exercises or movements that you need to understand to do in order to become better at engaging your core. Now that is number 1. Now number 2 builds on top of number 1, and we need to become really good at doing number 1. If we're lying on our back, guys, number 1 is essentially what I'm saying when I say push your back down into the floor. That is the rotation of the pelvis into the floor. So once we get that engagement, that number 1 is nice and tight. What it's doing is it's putting our muscles in the right position to fire correctly. Once those muscles are in the optimum position to fire correctly, that is when we get the best opportunity to have a strong core engagement. So after number 1, now these movements build up on top of each other. So you do number 2, but you can't lose number 1. That is the agreement, right? You have to be able to move through the phases without losing the engagement. So if you have that number 1 in the right position, wherever you are, sitting, standing, lying, I want you to imagine number 2. Number 2 is drawing in your belly button and trying to pull it in towards your spine. What that does is it sort of creates hollowing in the abdomen. It sort of creates that vacuum. It sucks everything in towards your spine. Now, if you had to try and do that without the number 1, you wouldn't be able to do it optimally. Even if you had to try and get that number 1 into too much of the opposite position, you wouldn't be able to engage it optimally. That is why it's very important to get yourself into the right position. Now that number 1, how do you know if you're in the right position or not? Well, generally, easy speaking, you take your index finger and your thumb. You put your index finger on the front of your pelvis. You put your thumb on the back of your pelvis. And you'll find that they will be at a slight angle naturally. What you want to do is bring them in line. So you're bringing that index finger in line with your thumb. If you go over and above that, can you see? You're going to start rounding your back. If you don't do that and you go the opposite way, you start arching your back. So you really just want to get them in the right level position. Number 1. Number 2, suck belly button in. Now you should start to feel a bit of tension. Now, how do we know if we've got the right tension or the wrong tension? It's very difficult to understand that in the beginning. But essentially what I want you to think about is, oh, sorry, I need to start. I didn't start that other video. What I want you to think about is essentially bringing that belly button in. Put your index finger just in front of your pelvis in the soft belly button, in the soft belly. And if you had to squeeze, guys, if you had to cough, I know we don't want to cough too much in public right now, but if you had to try and cough in the comfort of your home, you would find a lot of tension pushes out onto your fingers when you cough, right? So what we want to do is make sure that we are engaging those muscles, holding that cough, and getting an understanding of what it feels like to get that pressure onto our fingers. Once we have an understanding of that cough, we then don't have to cough again. It's just about understanding what it feels like to build tension through this sequential movement. So we go again. Number 1, rotation. Number 2, suck in. Feel that tension, which should feel similar to a little bit of a cough. Number 3, guys, is the pelvic floor, which is something that we spoke about. Now the pelvic floor is difficult to engage, very difficult. But easy way to think about it is, imagine like you got to go to the bathroom right now. You get to that toilet and there's a long queue. Now what do? You have to hold everything in, right? You hold everything in from the bottom up. Now a lot of you doing this, you'll find that you'll lose your rotation or you'll lose your drawing in. It's very difficult, guys. It takes a lot of practice. These movements, I'd say, often take about 2 weeks of consistent practice, guys. So if you don't do that, unfortunately, it's not going to become something that you do involuntarily. And that's what you need to do, right? You want your core to engage involuntarily so that you don't have to think about it all the time. It becomes a bit of a hack if you have to do that. But what you want is that core to just naturally engage throughout your daily life without you even thinking about it. And that will be the best way to go about it, essentially. Just hold on a second, guys. I've got a couple of messages. There's a couple of people requesting to see the video. Maybe you can accept them on that Instagram. Can you do it twice itself? Dennis Scott, Judy Sandero, some others. I think you can log on to Instagram on the laptop. Okay, then do it. Alright guys, sorry about that. Either way, we're going to continue. I know there's a couple of guys wanting to join, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so now we're getting on to that third step. Okay guys, we're going to be sucking that belly button in after number 2. And number 3 is the drawing in of the pelvic floor muscles. So drawing those up into your gut. Now you should really start to feel really good tension on that abdominal region, guys. So that's the 1, 2, 3. The 1, 2, 3 is only halfway, but if you can do the 1, 2, 3, it's a great start. It's a great start because then you know that your hello Michael, then you'll know that you will have the optimal engagement for anything related to your lower back. Your 1, 2, 3, that rotation, the sucking in, the sucking up. Right guys, lower back taken care of. But why is it a 1 to 6 that I want to teach you? Because remember what I said, the core engagement is important. It's an important part of your entire spine. So just worrying about your lower back is not enough, guys. We want to try and focus on the entire spine. So now if we had to move on to number 4, number 4 is related to your thoracic region. 4 and 5 is thoracic region. Now number 4 is take your shoulder blades, right? Your scapula behind your back. They should generally sit and lie around about in this orientation. Now, if you think about squeezing them together, you're trying to pull your shoulder blades back together, right? So if you think of those shoulder blades as sitting like this, what you're trying to do is bring them to touch together. Now, a lot of people will struggle to just bring them to touch. What they will do is they'll go up into their traps. That's not good. You don't want to do that. You want to stay away from your traps as much as you can simply because these muscles are often overactive in a lot of people. If you spend a lot of time sitting, if you're very sedentary throughout your daily life and you work on a laptop throughout your daily life, if you drive a lot, guys, most, even school kids, if you're sitting in school for 8 hours a day, normal 8 to 5 businesses also, most of those guys will be struggling a lot with their upper neck, upper back essentially being extremely tight. So that number 4 is not as easy as it sounds. It's about trying to bring those shoulder blades together, but without getting the shoulders to rise towards your ears. So you want to just try and bring them together. A subtle movement is all it takes. So try and bring them together. Number 5 is dropping those shoulders away from your ears while still maintaining that number 4. So now if you had to look at the shoulder blades, what you'll find is the squeeze at number 4, the drop at number 5, and you'll feel a hell of a lot of tension into the middle of your back. Now that 4 and 5 need to happen along with your 1, 2 and 3. So if we go over it again, we have the 1, which is the rotation, the 2, which is the sucking in, the 3, which is the sucking up, building tension, the 4, which is the squeeze, the 5, which is the drop. Now I'll feel like I've got a hell of a lot of tension in the front and a hell of a lot of tension in the back, which is great, guys. I'm building tension throughout my spine. I'm slowly building up all the way to my neck. Number 6, it's the neck. Very simple movement. Most ladies don't like it when I tell them to try and get a double chin, but essentially that's what you need to try to do. If you look at me from the side, it's about trying to draw in your chin towards your neck. And what that does is it builds tension in the front. You might feel a bit of a stretch in the back. But essentially now, if you think about it, you've got your 1, your 2, your 3, 4, 5, 6. Now in this position, I am in my optimal core engagement capacity. Now, all good and well having that engagement, but it's not very easy to walk around maintaining that engagement. You look a bit awkward. You can't be doing that throughout your daily life, guys. So the reason why I say that is it becomes quite important to make sure that you practice this doing things that you do often enough. So if that's sitting replying to emails, I'd say every time you get an email, get yourself into the right position. Every time you send an email, put yourself in the right position. If you're driving, every time you get to a red robot, get yourself in the right position. What does that do, guys? It builds a routine in our life. It makes our mind, it basically tricks our mind into thinking this is the new normal. And when it comes to back and the core, those muscles really respond to working at a low intensity for a long period of time, rather than doing something really hard for short bursts. It's about reinforcing that engagement. It's about constantly being in your mind and telling your body how to engage throughout your daily life, rather than just sitting, doing a 30-minute core workout and thinking that you're getting a strong core from it. It's not about that, guys. It's a lifestyle issue. Most of our core issues and back issues that I see a lot of kids and elderly people struggling with, they are lifestyle issues, guys, and we're not going to fix that with 30 minutes of physical activity in a day. We just have to be much better throughout our daily life when we do these things. So it's extremely important that we understand the basics and that we can teach the basics to people so that we can then get the most out of it when we actually get to a stage where we might be more susceptible to injury or becoming ill, you know. And that sort of relates to the next phase of this discussion or talk that I'm giving right now. Not much of a discussion going on, but it relates to how do you apply this to your daily life. Because yeah, it's all good and well, Nick, you can show me how to do the 1 to 6, that's all great, but how does that actually relate to my daily life? Well, it's quite simple, guys. I want you guys to perform basic daily movements and maintain your core engaged the way that I've just shown you now. So a simple thing like a sit to stand. So if you had to get a chair, and now if I put the chair here and I just sit and stand. If I tell people to do a sit to stand, this is what it's going to look like most of the time. They're going to just drop down. They're going to sit really hard onto that chair. They're then going to use their hands to push up. But now, if I ask those very same people to engage their core, set their shoulders, tuck their chin in, so go through that 1 to 6, and maintain that engagement while slowly sitting to the chair and slowly coming back up, there's about a 10 percentile of people that can actually do that correctly. Most of the others will get about halfway and either drop directly down onto the chair or lose their core engagement and think that they got all the way down. But guys, it's not as easy as it seems. It's very, very difficult, and that's the reality of it. I mean, you can make an exercise as hard as you need it to be, but it all comes down to how much engagement do you have of that specific movement, and how well are you able to connect your mind to those muscles that I've just spoken about and hold those muscles throughout the movement. And if that answer is not very good, well, then you're going to suffer, or you're going to be in trouble, or you're going to do a workout like the one that I prescribed today and feel like, it's too easy. But it's not the case, guys. The most simplest exercises are often the hardest, and that's because we simply don't have a good idea of how to engage it. So I've gone over how to apply that to a basic squat. That's a sit to stand movement. It's an advancement of it. Well, it's a regression of a squat, but you can get the idea. The other thing that's quite important is forward bending, guys, or like picking things up from the floor. Now, anytime you want to pick something up from the floor, you need to try and think about the ramifications of your core with that movement, right? So if I've got this kettlebell and I ask people to pick it up, this is what it's naturally going to look like. You're going to find someone's just going to bend down completely, back completely bent, right? And this takes me to the next point. It's the importance of deadlifts and how those relate to our daily life. Now, most of you will listen and say, deadlift, that's an Olympic movement. That's something that I've watched people do on TV with very heavy weights and popping their veins out their necks. But it is not the case, guys. A deadlift is a basic functional movement that all of us need to be able to do. And if you don't have an idea of how to do the deadlift, I'm sure it's something that's going to come up throughout this IMF challenge that we're doing. I'm not going to worry about it too much today, but it's very important to apply that deadlift technique to picking things up from the floor. Simple things like maintaining your core engaged and keeping a nice straight back when picking something up is way better than bending your back and picking that up and then hurting your back. And often that's how people hurt their back. They'll pick something up or they'll do a strange movement and their back will just go off. And they'll think, well, what have I done wrong? I've picked that kettlebell up 20 times today and nothing happened. I did that specific movement and now I've hurt myself. Well, what has happened there, guys, is quite simple. You don't have a strong core. You don't have a good engagement. So your body was just set up for failure, essentially. It was only about time until it actually ended you up in an injury. Then the last movement that I want to talk about is not necessarily a movement, but it's how often we sit. Guys, sitting is directly correlated to a higher mortality rate. That's a fact. And if you are sedentary in your daily life, very sedentary, more than 5 hours of sitting in a day, especially how a lot of us are spending our days now indoors, not being able to go out, it's extremely important that you at least do something that gets that basic metabolic rate up. So just maintaining those engagements up throughout your daily life will be a hell of a lot better for you. And sitting is one of those things. Sitting is one of those things that has a high correlation to back pain. And if you sit for long periods of time, you generally end up with a weakened core and incorrect musculature around that. So generally very tight hip flexors. Guys, your hip flexors, a lot of people think they just live in your hips, but they do and don't. They sort of start at your lower back and they come all the way through into the front of your hip. So hip flexors are often number one causes of back pain. And also weakness of your glutes. A lot of people have that combination. If they're sitting for long periods of time, they're shortening their hip flexors, lengthening their glutes, and often leaving them in a position that's not very comfortable. So and not very conducive to engagement. So you'll find that that often leads to biomechanical issues, whether you're a runner, you're a sprinter, you're a swimmer, if you play golf. I mean, the core really is where all of it starts. And if you can take it back to that basic 1 to 6 engagement that I've just shown you, that is going to be your true formula to becoming a better you as you perform more, or as you advance through your exercises, right? Now, what I want to go over is how do we go about advancing exercises for core engagement. And this is where the guys that are watching right now can join me with the core exercises. There's Michael, just reinforcing that deadlifts are a movement of everyday life. So guys, anyone who just joined the cast now, I'll just read what Michael said. It's something that I've mentioned in terms of deadlifts. So now I'm gonna get Leah to come through and just lie on the mat, and she is going to be the patient. Now guys, I'm going to be taking you through a couple of core advancements and regressions. So basically, I'm going to take you through the positions. So I'm going to start off in a lying down position. I'm going to go over into a lying down on your tummy position, side lying, as well as a hands and knees position. Now again, I mentioned those 4 positions as the 4 positions of daily life. And I think I might need to move Leah a little bit further backwards, just so you can see her a bit better. That's it. Good. So now what we're going to be doing here, guys, is first of all, I'm going to ask Leah to just bend her knees. Now with bending her knees, what she's doing is she's taking a lot of pressure away from her lower back. Because what happens, guys, if her legs are straight, can we see how her lower back is arching? Michael's writing's kind of in the way, but it's arching. I can fit my whole arm underneath her back. Now if I ask her to bend her knees, automatically that lower back gets put in the right position. And what's number 1 in a lying down position? Guys, it's that rotation. It's pushing her lower back into the floor. So she's doing that automatically with lifting her knees up. So number 1. What's number 2? Sucking the belly button in towards the spine. So often to my clients, what I'll say is pull the belly button away from my hand. Draw it away from my hand. What I'm then going to ask you to do is hold that wee in. Suck it up. Hold it nice and tight. And you can start to feel the pressure building around the core. Now, because she's lying down, guys, I'm not too fussed about her upper back and her neck position. It's quite safe right now. She's lying. Everything is in contact with the ground. She's not going to hurt herself. Those 4, 5, and 6, so the squeeze of the shoulders, the drop of the shoulders, the chin tuck, that only comes into play in a seated, standing, and hands and knees position, which is what I'm going to get to just now. But if we go back over this, the most basic engagement that you can do is simply this. Lying down on your back, engaging the core, and holding. Hold it for 10, 20 seconds, I don't care. Hold it for as long as you can. But what's very important about it is breathing. You need to learn to breathe whilst maintaining the same tension. And that's not easy, guys. What happens is that diaphragm expands and retracts, and when it does that, the pressure in the abdominal region changes automatically. So when that changes, you need to be able to engage your muscles differently so that you can maintain that tension. And that takes practice. Like I said, if you can practice this throughout the day for 2 weeks, you'll find that your engagement will become a hell of a lot better. Now, the most basic exercise that anyone can do, anyone suffering with back pain, anyone who is not too sure how to do any core exercises, a nice test for anybody is, I'm just going to come around to this side of the camera and we need to see this side. You're going to straighten one leg for me on the floor. Other leg, baby. This leg. Right. So what Leah's doing, you can't really see too well, but she's got a leg straight out on the floor. Now with that straight out leg, what I'm going to ask her to do is do a basic leg raise. Now she's engaging the core. She's got her core nice and tight. And the trick about this is you need to be able to feel if your core is engaging evenly throughout the movement. Once the core starts to fluctuate a little bit, that tension on your fingers starts to fluctuate a little bit, then we know that you're not getting the right engagement anymore. So you stop. At whatever point, you lose your engagement. And you slowly drop it down maintaining that engagement. And you can repeat this again, guys. You can repeat this 4 to 5 sets of about 20 if you wanted to. This could be an exercise all on its own. And if you do it very well, if you do it with the correct engagement, you'll find you're actually going to get quite a big burn out of it. Even though it seems like a basic exercise, anybody can lift a leg up. But can everybody lift a leg up whilst maintaining those 1 to 6 engagements that I've mentioned? No, not many people can. So it's very important, easy way to start to practice a core engagement. To then advance that, guys, what I suggest is the first exercise which was on the list today. It's the heel taps. The heel taps is one of the most basic ones, but the reason why it's still quite difficult is now because you've got your feet up in the air. And what you're going to learn a lot today about core and how to progress the exercises, it's quite simple, guys. It's all about stability. The more unstable you make the individual, the harder the exercise is going to be. So with that first exercise, we had a foot on the floor and we had a leg lifting. That foot was on the floor. She had a point of contact that was very safe. Now by lifting that other leg up in the air, now she's only got her hands and her back as the point of contact. Her legs are up in the air. So now the movement's a lot more unstable. Now important with this movement, it's about slowly letting the legs drop one at a time, whilst again maintaining that core engagement, that 1 to 3 in the front over here, making sure the lower back is not lifting. For those of you that are unsure whether your lower back is lifting, what you can simply do is take a TheraBand or a towel or something and you tie it around the foot of a table. And you make sure that you put that underneath the back with some tension. And then you rotate your back into that band. Now, if you start doing the exercises and that band slides out your back, then you know that you've lost your core. So make sure that you reset, pull the band back, and get that engagement going again. The next advancement is the cycling. Now, the cycling might not look more unstable than the first movement that we did, but it is, because what we were doing earlier was still moving one leg at a time. Even though both feet were in the air, only one leg was moving at the time. Whereas now, what is happening? Both the legs moving simultaneously. This makes it quite difficult from a cognitive perspective to maintain that engagement through your mind and still be able to perform the movement and breathe. So although it does seem like an easy exercise, it's not easy at all. There's faces going red. So it's very important that you do these exercises properly. It's like I said earlier in the video, it's quite easy. Asking to join. It's quite easy to just perform the exercises, but if you don't know how to do them correctly, you're not going to get the best out of it. And I'd rather always regress you to make sure that you're doing something 100% correctly before moving onto the next phase of a movement. It was just for today's sake to try and make the exercises a little bit more challenging, that we made people do pretty advanced movements that I generally wouldn't let anyone do in the first couple of weeks. But here we have it. Now guys, with those movements that we just did, to advance them in the very same positions, it's quite easy. I mentioned it in the video yesterday. It was just supporting your neck. What you do, I mean, you might not see Leah too well, but if she lifts her upper back up off the floor and tries to, let me just point it, there we go, just looking at the forehead up towards the ceiling, while she's got that engagement, you can already get a hell of a lot more engagement of your upper abdomen, and it will give you that sensation that you're engaging your core harder. And yes, you are, but at the same time, remember, we were talking about, you can relax down, we were talking about the importance of the deeper muscles over the importance of the shallow six-pack muscles, so to speak. And it's a lot better to get a deeper engagement than it is to get a shallow engagement. Right? If you're just looking for a nice core engagement and a nice core burner, then yes, lift your head up towards the ceiling and you can perform the exact same movement. So the heel tap and the cycling, that's pretty easy to do. Now guys, the other exercise that we had covered today was the pillow squeeze. It's generally done with a larger ball, a large physio ball, and that gives you the ability to push quite nicely into your knees with a lot of tension, but if Leah's just going to demonstrate it. Now this exercise, so first babe, just put your feet on the floor. This exercise, this is the first regression, right? So you should all start it with your feet on the floor. Feet on the floor, pushing the hands with straight arms into the knees. That already gets the core engaging if you've done your 1 to 6. This is particularly important if you've got lower back pain or if you don't want to do something that's going to force your lower back into arching. Because what happens now? Lift your legs for me. The moment you lift your legs up, this puts a hell of a lot more tension onto your lower back. And if you don't have a strong enough engagement, your lower back is going to arch. So very important to again maintain that number 1, that rotation of the pelvis pushing down into the floor. Now we've got that engagement and she's just pushing into the pillow. And guys, like I said, this can be done with a lot of other pieces of equipment, but the pillow is a nice easy thing for us to access in our homes. Now from this position, there are other ways to advance the exercises. They weren't part of the routine. I'm just briefly going to go, I actually won't. I'm going to do one more exercise in a lying down position. I'm then going to move, otherwise I will be running out of time. So just lift your feet up and your arms up into the air, knees bent. So this is the common dead bug, guys. So if we look at Leah over here, she's got her arms straight up in the air. She's got her legs bent up in the air. What I'm going to ask her to do is slowly drop one arm and one leg opposite sides towards the floor and alternating while still maintaining the lower back nice and tight into the floor. She's going to breathe out on the way out. She's going to breathe in on the way in. So you can see it's quite a challenging exercise, quite nice to keep her back on the floor. It's a much more advanced exercise than the ones that we did today. And simple reason being is if you look at it, guys, again, it comes down to how to make these exercises harder. It's stability. Now she has her hands and her legs up in the air. They're moving simultaneously, so that gets a lot of a cognitive overload. So it becomes very difficult from a somatosensory point of view, where your mind is now having to control a whole bunch of things. So there's many different regressions before someone should get to that. But if you felt today's exercise was a bit too easy, I'd suggest trying that. We're then going to turn Leah around and we're going to get her onto her tummy. Now on the tummy position is where we did an exercise today. I mean, you could call it a Superman. And essentially it's about trying to, again, engage your core. Keep your tummy nice and tight. Pushing down into the floor, sucking the belly button away from the floor. And then I'm going to ask Leah to engage. Do that number 4 and number 5. Squeezing her shoulder blades. Lifting her arms up into the air as high as she can. She's going to lift her chest up off the floor. Forward goes with it. And then she's going to squeeze her bum. And she's going to lift her legs straight up into the air. She gets herself into a nice position. And she's going to hold that. That's how you do that movement. Very important that you focus on that engagement. And a lot of tension over here, but her glutes need to be firing. They should be feeling rock solid. You can relax. From this position, we're going to go over the planks, guys. Now, planks is a commonly mistaken exercise. A lot of people think they know how to plank, and they often do it incorrectly because they don't have an understanding of what we've been speaking about for the last 40 minutes. How to engage your core throughout your daily life. So it's very important, guys. I'm going to get Leah into the most basic starting plank, and that's on her knees. If you watched my video last night, I mentioned that's where I like to start the planks off on, because it's a lot easier to engage, a lot easier to get your number 1, which is that rotation, number 2, sucking in, number 3, sucking up from the bottom, number 4, squeeze of the shoulders, number 5, drop them in, number 6, chin tuck. Now the last movement of the plank is just pulling knees, elbows in towards the knees. She's going to be getting an extremely tight core engagement over here, and she's on her knees, guys. She doesn't even have her feet up. She doesn't have any weight in her feet. Now if I ask Leah to relax, and I just ask her to put herself on her feet and show me what a normal plank generally looks like for a lot of people that come through the doors first time around. A little bit higher than that, give them a bit of credit. lower back completely arched. There's absolutely no engagement going on, and if you ask her where she's feeling that, it's going to be in her spine.
100%.
Not good, guys. Really, really not good. So I'd rather you take it back, make it a hell of a lot simpler, get onto your knees, and fulfill the plank on your knees. Then by all means, if you feel like you've got the strong engagement in that position, then yes, move up to a normal plank. Again, maintain that rotation. That's set. The glutes are squeezed. The core is tight. The pulling in of the elbows is happening as well. But guys, very difficult. I know you get people that plank for minutes at a time, but if you had to really ask them to do this engagement correctly and get their muscles into the right position and then consciously activate them, they would struggle. 30 seconds is more than enough when it comes to a plank. Now the same thing applies to your sideways plank, guys. For the side plank, it's the same thing. Leah's going to be on her knees. She's going to lift her hips up into the air. From this position, she can suck in, she can suck up, she can squeeze her shoulders. The last movement is that tucking in of the elbows, which is something that we mentioned last time. And trying to pull the elbow in towards the body, getting the lower half of the core, the obliques nice and firing. Even the bottom of the glutes is firing nice and strong. Again, no need to do this on your feet. But if you feel strong enough, then you obviously advance it onto your feet. And you can do that quite easily. It's just a hell of a lot more difficult of a movement. And a lot more things can go wrong. But at the same time, progression is a good thing. So you need to be able to progress. I'm giving you the very basics today. And hopefully later in the weeks, I'll be able to do very advanced exercises once you guys have practiced this for a couple of weeks. Now, that's an example of the front plank and the side plank, as well as the Superman position. Now, the last position that I want to go over is essentially the quadruped position. And before I go on the quadruped position, if there's any questions that anyone might have, or anything that you feel I haven't covered, Michael, that you want me to go over again, or anything really, guys, maybe specific to the sport that you're playing, or if there was any issues with the exercises that you did today, please start bombing those through so that I can look at them once I'm done with Leah, and we can start a little bit of a Q&A session. So, if I get Leah in a hands and knees position, hands and knees position looks like this. I want her knees directly underneath her hips. I want her hands directly underneath her shoulder. Now in this position, if she does the number 1, she's rotating. Number 2, sucking up. Number 3, sucking up from the pelvis. Number 4, squeezing the shoulders. Number 5, dropping the shoulders. Number 6, tucking in. Now already just holding this position, it's going to be very, very difficult for her. Just holding it will get your core working. You don't need to do anything more than this. Now, what we had today was the alternating. So from here, what we do, try and keep that 1 to 6 engagement whilst alternating and slowly changing it up to the other side. Now guys, what I often say is imagine like you've got a nice ice cold drink on your back. That drink mustn't spill. A nice thing to practice is actually put something on your lower back. See if you can keep it there throughout the movement. This is the quadruped alternating position, and it's one of the advancements of core exercises. Again, you can make this exercise a hell of a lot difficult. Right now, her knees are on the floor, but what we're going to get going onto is more of a bear crawl type movement now, where her knees actually come off the floor. So if we get her onto her hands and knees, again, get that same engagement, make sure she's got it. Now I'm going to ask you to put a bit more weight onto her feet and lift her knees ever so slightly off the floor. Now even just in this position, rotate a little bit more. This position, just holding it, very, very difficult. Want to advance it? Alright, bring your knees in, one at a time. Slowly tuck a knee in whilst maintaining the back nice and still. Still want to advance it? Alright, from that position, we're going to do some shoulder taps. So getting into that, nice and tight, and you can see she's struggling with it. There's a lot of movement going on. So obviously still too difficult for Leah to advance to a movement like that one. But essentially guys, what I'm getting to is the core. It's not as simple as a lot of people like to think it is. It's a lot more advanced. It takes a lot of work throughout daily life in order to have a strong core. It's not necessarily doing your 15-20 minutes a day of ab exercises. That's not going to get you a strong core. What is going to get you a strong core is having a good awareness between your mind and those muscles that I've mentioned, and understanding how to engage those muscles throughout your daily life without letting it affect your daily life. So you want to be able to do those movements without thinking about it, and before you know it, you pick something up and you engage your core without actually doing anything. So that's really where you want to be. And if you're not there right now, you're about 2 to 3 weeks away. So it's a perfect time right now whilst you're home doing, well, not much. Yeah, bad posture there, she caught me. I've been doing this for a while now, I'm really tired. My core is clearly not as strong as it should be. And also that core workout today was quite tough.
It was tough.
And we made it a little bit tougher actually. We decided to do some sprints in our parking lot. So we did about 80-meter sprints as well as the skips. So that was pretty difficult. But yeah, guys, if you have any questions, please do bomb them through. If you don't, that's also perfectly okay. I'm going to be putting a copy of this video for anyone to look at. It might not be the exact same video. It might just be a pre-recorded recap of what I did. I know this is quite long, but it's just a nice recap on how to engage your core, the basics of the engagement, what muscles you need to focus on, and the 6 steps to having a stronger, better engagement. I think that's pretty much where I'm gonna tap off today in terms of the information sharing. But yeah, I see there's no questions. I see Donna saying cycling was so tough. Yes,
Yes,
Donna,
yes.
it is very, very tough. But you can always make those exercises tougher. So I often find that when I do the exercises, it starts to feel a little bit too easy. I then know that I'm probably not doing it correctly. So I need to often take a step back, think about how to do it better, and then go out and perform it. And if I'm not consciously thinking about it, then it becomes a lot more difficult. And yeah, thanks Donna. Thanks for your support, Donna. I appreciate it. So it's very important, guys. Try and apply it through daily life. This can be a challenge for you guys for this week. I'd say if you're in your home,
Which you are.
try and figure out things that you're doing a lot of, and try and put a little core engagement in those things. So whether it be every time you sit at the dining room, every time you stand up from the dining room table, make sure you have that engagement. If every time you get into bed at night time, do a couple of engagements. Make sure that you have Nalfrey wanting CPD points for this. I wish we were all getting CPD points for this, Nalfrey. If at night time before getting into bed, if you want to do a couple of those engagements as well, perfect time to do it in the morning before your meditation or after your meditation. Remember, guys, or during your meditation. Yeah, guys, we're just trying to empower you to just get into a better routine. And if you're not doing a core activation as part of your routine, then you lacking at certain aspects, and you think that you might be extremely strong in the gym, but it might not necessarily be the case when it comes to actually looking at the specifics of it.